In the late 19th century, during the height of the American Gilded Age, people were promised great fortune and equal economic opportunity as cities grew and the country industrialized. Big businesses rose up, their owners hungry for success and wealth, while at the same time crushing the dreams and opportunities of those below them. This vicious cycle continued for many years until the American people were fed up with the graft and corruption and decided to take their pens and paper and make a difference. Failure of the United States government to properly investigate corrupt businesses pushed many journalists to stand up against big businesses. The encounter between Ida Tarbell, a small-time historian and journalist, and the mighty Standard Oil set a precedent for using journalism to challenge popular beliefs and become the voice of the public. Standard Oil started off as a small oil business in Cleveland, Ohio, founded in 1863 by the venture capitalist John D. Rockefeller. Whereas the oil drilling industry was often dangerous and wasteful, Rockefeller saw more potential for success in oil refining. Rockefeller stressed efficiency, using all of the byproducts of oil production instead of throwing it away, and innovating new, safer methods in the workplace. By 1870, Rockefeller had turned his small local business into one of the biggest corporations in America, the Standard Oil Company.
The vision of John D. Rockefeller to create clean, accessible oil for all of America was completely unprecedented. This man saw beyond what people believed could be achieved, and because of that, he created one of the largest monopolies known to date.
At the time, oil burners were extremely dangerous and impure kerosene was highly prone to exploding and causing fires, claiming thousands of American lives each year. Rockefeller had a vision to create clean and accessible kerosene for all of America. He wanted his company to literally set the standard for clean and safe oil for the public. He mastered the art of refining oil, with careful control of temperature and time in the distilling process. He achieved his goal and produced much more pure and safe kerosene than his competitors. This was when the Standard Oil Company was born. Standard Oil was able to offer lower prices than their competitors through more efficient and reliable industry, over time gaining control of the entire industry. Before long, Rockefeller had a monopoly of the oil industry, creating a system of trusts to be able to legally control various smaller businesses across the country. It is estimated that the Standard Oil Company controlled 90 to 95% of all oil refined in the country. Rockefeller and the stockholders were making millions, with Rockefeller's net worth totaling at $340 million by the end of his life, but where all of that money and success came from was up for scrutiny. The Standard Oil Company was ruthless to their competition. Rockefeller took control of the oil industry by buying out and joining together with all of his competition, or if they refused to willingly join, Rockefeller would force them out of business. With his massive profits, he was able to drop his prices so much that he would even lose money, making it impossible for small businesses to compete. The small companies would then go bankrupt, while Standard Oil was practically unharmed, and would then purchase the now open property. It was illegal to monopolize an industry, but Rockefeller got past this by forming a series of trusts. The Standard Oil Company controlled refineries and smaller companies all across America, but these were all put under different names and ownerships while still all reporting to and sharing profits with the main branch in Cleveland. Standard Oil was also notorious for making illegal agreements with railroad companies, getting much lower rates than their competition in exchange for steady and reliable business. Meanwhile, despite their shady dealings, Rockefeller and the other shareholders were practically untouchable, quite proficiently covering up any evidence of their illegal actions. That, coupled with their strong influence on the markets, allowed them to continue their corruption for some time, that is, until a young journalist set out to expose them for all their deeds. One of the loudest voices in investigative journalism can be accredited to a woman by the name of Ida Tarbell. Tarbell was born in Amity Township, Pennsylvania in 1857, where she grew up with her working-class family that managed fairly well in the economy. Her father, Frank Tarbell, was a small business oil refinery owner. The Tarbell family did pretty well for themselves. The oil business was good and a sense of security. Things were going well in Father's business, she would write years later. There was ease such as we had never known, luxuries we had never heard of. Then, suddenly, our gay, prosperous town received a blow between the eyes. The 1872 South Improvement Scheme, a hidden agreement between the railroads and refiners led by John D. Rockefeller, hit the Pennsylvania oil region like a tidal wave. It hit the Tarbells too, leaving behind painful memories that would be rekindled 30 years later. Out of the alarm and bitterness and confusion, I gathered from my father's talk a conviction to which I still hold, that what had been undertaken was wrong. After concluding her higher education in Allegheny College as the only female in the graduating class of 1880, Tarbell moved on to teaching science in Ohio, only to resign 2 years later. With her return to Pennsylvania, she came across a small publishing company known as the Chautauquan. With this company, she skyrocketed her career as a journalist. She became famous through biographies on famous men in history, but as the new century occurred, the tides of journalism changed. There seemed to be a great demand on coverage of the changes in the economy as well as the investigation of monopolistic company. Tarbell commented that these aspects were disturbing and confusing the people.
The reason why Tarbell was so passionate about covering the corruption of Standard Oil was because she had received hundreds of requests by the public to investigate the scene, as well as a first-hand personal experience with Rockefeller driving her father's company into the ground. This allowed her to not only cover the story, but write it with a certain passion that would really sway the public with her words.
A new generation of investigative journalists, later dubbed muckrakers by President Theodore Roosevelt, had set out to wage a campaign to expose corruption in business and political lawlessness. Tarbell latched onto the idea of using the story of Standard Oil to illustrate these troubling issues, writing a 3-part series on the oil trust. Ida's father had feared retaliation of Rockefeller on the magazine and advised her not to write the journals, but nothing appeared to stop Ida Tarbell from uncovering the truth. For almost 2 years, she looked through volumes of public records, including court testimony, state and federal reports, and newspaper coverage. From these, she gathered a mind-boggling wealth of information on Rockefeller's ascent and the methods used by Standard Oil. The breadth of her research was remarkable, but even more impressive was her ability to digest Rockefeller's complicated business maneuvers into a narrative that would be accessible and engaging to the average reader. The years of research combined with her eloquent writing fused the extremely popular narrative known as The History of the Standard Oil Company. The public was so intrigued with the writing that Tarbell extended the narrative to a 19-part series that highlighted Rockefeller's unethical tactics, sympathetically portraying the plight of Pennsylvania's independent oil workers. Still, she was careful to acknowledge Rockefeller's brilliance and the flawlessness of the business structure he had created. She did not condemn capitalism itself, but the open disregard of decent ethical business practices by capitalists. About Standard Oil, she wrote, "They had never played fair, and that ruined their greatness for me." While most of the public and even the government couldn't touch Standard Oil, Ida Tarbell was able to expose it for what it truly was. Her book, The History of Standard Oil Company, included a praise for Rockefeller's accomplishments, but also revealed all of the corruption and illegal actions he took part in to get where he was.
To know every detail of the oil trade, to be able to reach at any moment its remotest point, to control even its weakest factor. This was John D. Rockefeller's ideal of doing business. It seemed to be an intellectual necessity for him to be able to direct the course of any particular gallon of oil from the moment it gushed from the earth until it went into the lamp of a housewife. The coal oil business belongs to us was Mr. Rockefeller's motto, and from the beginning of his campaign in the markets, his agents accepted and acted on that principle.
The trial against the Standard Oil Company started in 1906. They were accused of unreasonable restraint of trade through purposely running companies out of business and monopolizing the oil industry. Rockefeller was clever in court, tactfully dodging questions and covering up for himself, never revealing more than what was already known. Despite knowing what he did, the court had little to no way of providing evidence for it, and so Standard Oil Company was left untouched for 5 years. Tarbell and other reporters testified against Rockefeller, accusing him of fixing prices, bribery, running competitors into bankruptcy, and making negotiations with railroad companies for lower rates. Rockefeller denied all of this, claiming the monopoly was a coincidence due to his superb and efficient business naturally coming to success, and that he was not getting the lowest rates that he knew of. His clever words in court and lack of solid evidence left Tarbell and the government feeling stumped. As Tarbell described it, Standard Oil was a force powerful as gravitation and as intangible.
Standard Oil seemed to be invincible. No matter how hard they tried, no one seemed to be able to get any definitive proof for any of Rockefeller's crimes. Everyone knew what he did, and yet there was seemingly nothing they could do about it. He had been doing his corrupt business for some time, and he didn't plan on stopping. He was completely calm the whole time and didn't fear the law.
The government formed committees to thoroughly investigate the Standard Oil Trust, and by May 1911 it finally came to a close. The Standard Oil Company was found guilty of monopolizing the oil industry, causing unreasonable obstruction of trade. The trust was to be broken up in the following 6 months, but Rockefeller was still not worried. In the following years, Rockefeller would try to bring the trust together again, and in a similar manner continue to control and make millions off of the oil industry, but the government action did inhibit them, eventually leading to the breakdown of the Standard Oil Trust completely. Throughout the Gilded Age, corrupt businesses utilized monopolistic tactics to completely take over the industry in the name of free trade. These big companies expanded their impact on America, not only through the people but from corrupt local and national government. Standard Oil Company not only set the standard for cleaner oil but raised the bar for advanced and corrupt tactics to completely and utterly dominate the oil trade. But all it took was one investigative journalist with over 2 years of research and a 19-section documentary of the corruption of Standard Oil Company to bring it to its knees.